Farzana, to begin with, I think people have sort of tended to describe Imran Khan as a populist leader in the mold of other populist leaders around the world. I mean, there's been this wave in the last 5-10 years between Trump in America, Modi in India, all across Europe, Putin in Russia, and so on. There's been a sort of wave of populism. How much do you think that Imran Khan fits into that wave? I mean, do you think we can just categorize him as another one of those guys?
Can I start on a slightly frivolous note by saying that...
Hold it right up.
Oh, can you hear me now? On a slightly frivolous note by saying that I won't at any point be talking about the hot side of Imran Khan. This is only a metaphorical reference.
Does he have another side?
It's only a metaphorical reference to the difficulties and challenges that he faces by being in the hot seat. Though, there is also some competition there, because I believe that these days the hot seat is actually occupied by MBS, otherwise known as Mohammed bin Salman. But anyway, that's another subject. To get back to your question about populism, I think it's an important and vital question, and my own view is that superficially, Imran Khan represents a kind of populism or populist language that we've all come to recognize, a language that we nowadays associate with Trump in America, with Duterte in the Philippines, Erdogan in Turkey. But I tend to think that the brand of populism that Imran Khan represents is somewhat different, because for the most part, the populism that we have been used to and talk about is generally described as an anti-system, anti-establishment populism. And I think what's interesting about Imran Khan's brand of populism is the degree to which, in fact, it appears to be a manufactured populism, a populism that is sustained and supported by the establishment, rather than a populism that runs against it. And I think this represents a new phenomenon. How it's going to play out and pan out, we still have to wait and see. But I do believe that making comparisons and drawing comparisons between Imran Khan's brand of populism and the populism elsewhere that we see, whether of the left or the right, is possibly misplaced. I could be wrong, but there you are.
Because I think we do, generally all appreciate that without the backing of the so-called deep state in Pakistan, Imran Khan would never have risen to power. So in that sense, he certainly is a populist with establishment backing. But on the other hand, I mean, he has successfully, in his political campaign, he successfully did what other populists do, in the sense that he did manage to channel their grudges. He channeled their anger against corruption in the previous regime. He channeled their anger against supposed immorality and so on. So he was successful in that sense, and he does fit into the populist mold in that sense, wouldn't you say?
Yes. There's no doubt about that. He has channeled that kind of popular or populist anger. There has been a great deal of popular discontent and disillusionment with the political system in Pakistan, which is roundly condemned by his constituency as being bogged down by what they call dynastic politics. Of course, Imran Khan's critics accuse him of having replaced dynastic politics with the politics of the cult of personality. So really, it's a little bit between the deep blue sea, the devil and the deep blue sea. So we do have that difficulty. I think his great sort of mobilizing rhetoric has centered on corruption, which is a real issue in Pakistan, which has troubled many people, not just his own constituency, but those beyond it, even amongst his critics. It is recognized as a real problem. But I think there are many who also believe that corruption pretty much ranks on the same level as Pakistan's problems with religious violence and religious extremism. And on these two issues, Imran Khan has had virtually nothing to say. The emphasis has been entirely on questions of corruption and political accountability, much of it, of course, directed against his political enemies. But little or nothing at all is said about the threat posed to Pakistan's body politic by jihadist groups. And of course, Imran Khan is known to have made rather questionable compromises with some sections of the far right in Pakistan, about
Farzana,
which we
if I may ask, I mean, what sort of, I mean, how would you categorize Imran Khan as a Muslim? What sort of Muslim is he on a sort of spectrum? I mean, it can be, he comes across as being a sort of modern person, but then when you look at what he actually says about issues such as blasphemy, feminism, etc., it's a bit shocking. And then also when you consider what his ex-wife, Reham Khan, wrote about him, sorry, this is the the other side of Imran Khan, it seems there's a major disjuncture between his public persona in terms of religion and his private life.
Yes, I mean, you asked me what kind of Muslim he is. The short answer to that is that he's a born-again Muslim. He emerged, in the public domain as a very talented cricketer, but also as something of a socialite who lived the high life in London and frequented glittering society balls in the company of glittering society belles. But since then, there has been something of a transformation, and we've seen him become an increasingly pious Muslim. Though I must say, his version and brand of piety, is very heavily informed by a certain kind of strict Salafi Islam. It's not the kind of Sufi piety that you see right across the country. It tends to be rather more orthodox, rather more given to narrow interpretations of Islam, which brings me to this question that you raised about his stance on blasphemy. Now, in his autobiography, Imran Khan led us to believe that he was not altogether comfortable with Pakistan's draconian laws against blasphemy. But of course, that autobiography was written many years ago. Much water has passed under the bridge since then. And he has since emerged as a very strong advocate of keeping in place Pakistan's draconian blasphemy laws, which of course, as many of you will know, entail the death penalty for insulting or being seen to insult the Prophet Muhammad. Now, many critics of Pakistan's blasphemy laws and critics who sort of also aim their criticism against Imran Khan see these laws as discriminatory, as laws that discriminate against Pakistan's religious minorities. And there is absolutely no indication that Imran Khan intends to reform, let alone repeal these laws. And indeed, during the election campaign, made much of the fact that it was his party and his party alone that would safeguard Pakistan's blasphemy laws. And he, in fact, denounced the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his party of seeking to ease restrictions on blasphemy laws in Pakistan. I don't know how many of you followed the dismissal of the former law minister in 2017, who was accused of tampering with electoral forms which certain parties on the religious right dedicated to promoting laws against Pakistan, accused by these parties of seeking to relax the restrictions on blasphemy and seeking in some way to edge these laws out of sort of their usual application. And at that time, Imran Khan, which was last year, emerged to say that, here was an example of the PMLN showing that, in fact, it was caving in to pressure from the West to amend and reform these laws. So really, his stance on issues like blasphemy, which is really one of the most difficult and troubling aspects of the current dispensation in Pakistan, are not very encouraging.
Would you say it was fair to call him a hypocrite? I mean, that his personal attitudes may be different from his public ones?
Well, I'm not here to sit in moral judgment of anyone. I can only go by what they say and the policies they pursue. I mean, for example, his stance on women again is very troubling. I mean, he is on record, his party is on record for having very strongly opposed in 2006 and 2016 legislation in the Punjab to protect women against domestic abuse. And at the time, Imran Khan said that for him to support this law would mean to sanction, as it were, the breakup of families in Pakistan. Now, as some of you know, his party was in power in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and there was talk during its tenure that the provincial government there would consider some legislation to protect women against domestic abuse. And Imran Khan, to be fair to him, listened very carefully to those who were pressing for such legislation. But his solution to that was to send the legislation to the Council of Islamic Ideology, led by Maulana Shirani, who of course made his name as someone who said that it was perfectly all right for a Muslim man to beat his wife as long as he did so lightly. So hardly a encouraging trend there.
And, I mean, to move away from religion per se, what sort of a leader is Imran Khan? I mean, how much room for maneuver does he really have? I mean, we know that he relied on the support of the deep state through his whole political rise, as had previous political leaders in Pakistan. But how much actual independence does he have from the army, the ISI, and so on?
Well, there has, of course, been a great deal of speculation about Imran Khan's rise to power. As we know, until he won these elections, his party had performed very, very badly. It started off with just one seat in the National Assembly. So, of course, that has fueled claims that, his rise to power, which has been pretty meteoric in the last 12 months, has been aided and abetted by the military or the deep state. Now, there is some truth to that, though I would not want to overplay that, in order to take away from what I see as genuine popular support for Imran Khan. There is popular support for him. He has clearly hit a nerve somewhere, and his political discourse does chime with many millions across the country. As for his room for maneuver, well, that goes back precisely to the point that you were making. I think when it comes to Pakistan's key foreign policy issues, which relate to relations with India, with Afghanistan, with the United States, like all his predecessors, like all previous governments, I think it's very likely that his room for maneuver is going to be very limited. These are core foreign policy concerns over which the military in Pakistan has jealously guarded its prerogative. So I don't expect to see much change there. I think where he will get some leeway or be given leeway is, of course, in attempting to implement, his reform program for Naya Pakistan, for New Pakistan, which involves, 5 million new homes, 10 million new jobs. Though, as I mentioned yesterday during one of the other panel sessions on Pakistan, given Pakistan's dire economic conditions, it's going to be extremely difficult for him to deliver on that reform program, at least in the short to medium term. But I think, as far as his style of leadership is concerned, Max, it is again quite astonishing to see how several weeks, at least 3 months now almost, of his occupying the seat of Prime Minister, he still conducts himself like an opposition leader. I mean, just 2 days ago, he gave a speech to the nation in which really the rhetoric and style of his discourse was indistinguishable from the kind of so-called container politics with which he had come to be associated last year. He talked about going after his political enemies. He talked again about thieves and looters. Basically, the same politics of vindictiveness that many people thought he might now leave behind to graduate to the level of a more statesman-like style. And he hasn't graduated to being quite the statesman that we are waiting to see.
And that which is also very much in the mold of other populist leaders, although he may be of a slightly different type, but that's very much, you could say very much the same thing about Mr. Trump, for example. But I just wanted to add a little comment about, as you were saying, that he does have real popularity. I mean, it's an important thing to note that his party is now the only party in Pakistan that actually has a political presence all across the country. The rival parties have kind of shrunk down back to their core constituencies, either in Punjab or in Sindh. They no longer are actually truly national, whereas his actually does sort of represent the nation in a way.
It does.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think that's a fair assessment. I think his base, of course, is an urban base. I mean, many parts, for example, of interior Sindh, his party has not been able to break through. Interior Sindh still remains, the stronghold of the Pakistan People's Party. And astonishingly enough, following the general elections, we did have by-elections. And the by-elections show in Pakistan's constitution where leaders are expected to emulate the attributes of the Prophet Muhammad. And of course, given, as I said earlier, Imran Khan's, reputation for being something of a playboy in his time, for being the father of an illegitimate daughter.
At least one, with according to
on record.
Excellent.
I mean, I'm this is the one we all know about. If there are others, you must know. I don't. But I mean, this kind of conduct is precisely the kind of thing that would make him vulnerable to those sorts of constitutional clauses being brought into effect against him. So it stands as a Damocles sword. And of course, the judiciary in Pakistan is an interesting institution in the way in which it has evolved. Long a handmaiden of the military, it recently has acquired the reputation of being something of an independent body with a mind of its own. But questions have been raised over the last couple of years about the independence of the judiciary in Pakistan, which once again is seen to be serving as the handmaiden of the military.
I think we have time for perhaps just one or two questions from the audience, if anyone has a very quick one. Yes, sir. The flow of terrorism from Pakistan. Very good. Well, I'll just share those two questions. One is whether there will be any change in Pakistan's position on the terrorism question, and the second is whether India should, if not, then why should India talk to Pakistan?
Right. Well, my response to that would be that, as I indicated, Imran Khan has been notably silent about what his government plans to do on the counter-terrorist front, on dealing with the activities of jihadist groups. As you know, Pakistan is currently on the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force and has not yet been able to persuade the body that it is doing enough to crack down on terrorist financing. So Imran Khan does have a problem there. Now, having said that, whether or not India should continue to adopt the stance of no talks with terrorists and no talks with terrorism, my own view is that that's not really very helpful. That is actually boxing India into a position which is almost as bad, I might add, as Pakistan boxing itself into the position by saying no talks until we can talk about Kashmir. There are so many other avenues the two countries can explore to ease relations between the two countries.
Thanks. We'll take another question if we can.
I think we have space for just one last question. Yeah. Go ahead, sir. I mean, up to you.
Asked, so.
No, that's another.
Can I continue?
Someone, yes, there's a lady sitting next to you. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my question to you was, you spoke about what options, how India would talk to Pakistan, in that context. I'd like to know, what do you think Imran Khan's course of action would be when he's dealing with India? Is there going to be any kind of difference from the previous governments? Can we expect anything new at all? Or is he going to go with the tried and tested method of IP longer than you did?
Well, the short answer is possibly not, certainly not in the short term. Though having said that, of course, supporters of Imran Khan do point to the fact that one of his earliest gestures upon taking power as Prime Minister was to reach out to India to open talks. And as you know, in his very first address to the nation, he said that if India took one step towards Pakistan, Pakistan would take two. And there are many of us who are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and to think that, yes, he may, still have some opportunities ahead to pursue this line of action, though given the past record where governments have tried to break through and craft an independent policy vis-a-vis India, such as Nawaz Sharif tried to do, those governments have in fact paid a heavy price. I'm not sure that Imran Khan is prepared to pay that heavy price just yet.
Thanks very much, Farzana. I'm afraid our time is up. Thank you. Thank you very much.